Hi everyone, John Pokerchip Friedberg here with another episode of Stacking Chips, your strategy source for the 2007 World Series of Poker, the Bellagio Cup, and the dozens of other events going on right here in lovely Las Vegas. Today is Thursday. We've got a big event today. It's a $1,500 no-limit hold'em event, one of the probably 30 $1,500 no-limit events they're holding here at the World Series this year. Again, it's going to be a big field, big prize pool, and once again, I'm very excited to play today. I didn't talk too much about what happened in my day two in the $2,500 shorthanded no-limit hold'em tournament, which was event number 31, I think. Finished that a couple of days ago. I came into day two after playing just perfect poker in day one, but losing a very big pot at the end of the day. I came into day two with 24,000 in chips, and the blinds were 1,500 and 3,000 with a $400 ante. And unfortunately, I started the day in the big blind. Well, I always claim myself to be a short stack ninja, and I was able to actually run my chips up in the first probably two and a half hours of the tournament. I ran my chips from about 24,000 up to about 60,000, and we'd started the day with 42 players. We're down to about 26 or 27 players. Anyway, so I run my chips up to 60,000. There's now the blinds are 2 and 4,000 with the $500 ante. There's a raise in front of me to 15,000. I look down on the button. I have pocket kings. I move all in for about 58,000 or something. The raiser called me. He had ace king, perfect flop, perfect turn, ace on the river. So that's what sent me home. I ended up taking 26th place for about $9,500. Obviously, I'm very upset with that. I mean, I'm happy to cash. I'd gone about 8 or 9 straight events without cashing since my final table in the pot limit event in week 1 of the World Series. But it's a very frustrating way to go out. You have a guy drawing a 3 outs on the river, and of course he got there, which sent me to the rail. If I would have won that pot, I would have been up to about 120, 130,000 in chips. And my opponents at the table weren't necessarily anybody I felt like. Well, let me just say this. I was at a pretty weak table overall, and there were a couple good players, but I had position on them. The other 2 players I felt were fairly weak, and I was just in a great spot on the table. There also wasn't too many great players left in the tournament, so I really felt like if I would have won that pot, I would have had no problem advancing to at least the top 2 tables and probably the final table, and potentially could have gone on to win my second bracelet. So there was one hand that I played that I wanted to talk about, and it was a move, like what I consider to be an amateur move made by one of the more well-known professional players, but this person tried to make a move on me and didn't quite work. Might have worked on an amateur player. Anyway, I kind of got a kick out of it. I thought it was funny, so I thought I would share it with you guys. So I just doubled up. This is also in day 2 of the tournament. I had just doubled up from 24K to start the day up to about 50,000 in chips. The blinds are 1,500 and 3,000. Again, this is my short-handed table. And I'm under the gun. I'm in first position with an ace-jack of hearts. I make a standard raise to 9,000. And again, I had about 50,000 to start the hand, so I have about 41 left. So I make a raise under the gun to ace-jack of hearts. Mimi Tran, who's in middle position or cut off, because it is a 6-handed table, she goes all in for like 70,000. And the button folds, small blind folds, big blind folds. It goes back to me. I'm thinking about this. I play with Mimi a lot. She's very aggressive, right? She overbets weaker hands sometimes, as do many players in this spot. I mean, it's when there's a race of 9,000 in front of you and you have 70,000. That's like one of those weird trigger points where if you have aces, you don't necessarily want to go all in and scare away all your action. But at the same time, you don't want to just raise to 30K for half your stack, because then it's kind of obvious you have aces. But typically, if you have any kind of mediocre, to decent hand, you're just going to go all in there because you don't want to have to call off the rest of your stack. Anyway, long story short, you're going to call anyway if you re-raise, so why not just put all your chips in? Anyway, she puts all her chips in. I'm thinking about it for about 45 seconds. I'm thinking, well, she could have a medium pair. She could have a bigger ace. There's a lot of hands that she could have there. So as I'm thinking about it, I stand up. I sort of get on the chair on my knees, and I'm just thinking about it. didn't say a word to anyone. I'm just looking at her chips, looking at mine, trying to decide if I want to risk my chips. And Mimi says, he called? And I looked at her, and she said to the dealer that he said call. He said call, right? Anyway, long story short, so Mimi is pretending as if I had said something and that I called, as if she's pretending to be excited about the fact that I called. Well, I knew that I hadn't even moved my lips to where there was any possible way that she could have mistakenly thought that I said call, because not a sound came out of my mouth and my lips didn't even move. I was just staring around. So that to me was a huge tell. And right after that, I knew that I was going to call, because I just felt like it was a total acting job where she was trying to pretend that she was excited that I was going to call. And, of course, if I had a weak hand there and I fell for this little trick, then I might have folded my hand. But instead, I insta-called after she did that, because I knew she wasn't strong. Funny thing is, she actually turned over the ace-jack of spades. We had the same hand, so we ended up splitting the pot. So I thought that was funny. So I have a slightly different show for you guys today. I'm going to get to a few email questions first, and then I'm going to bring on my guest. But rather than having on a regular tournament professional, I thought it would be fun and different and unique to bring on a part-time player. So I invited my friend Matt on the show today. He's a very good friend of mine. He lives in Washington, D.C., plays frequently in Atlantic City in the cash games, and a lot of people come up to me and ask about part-time play, how they balance their poker career with their professional life, and bankroll questions, and whether they should play poker full-time or continue working. And I thought it would be a great idea to get Matt on here to talk about his experience. He's very successful both in the corporate world. He's also very successful as a part-time player, making about the same amount of money playing poker recreationally as he does in the workplace. And like myself, Matt also has an MBA. He's just putting his to use a little more than I am at the moment. But that said, we'll get to Matt in a few minutes, but let me just go through a couple of questions that have come in. By the way, thank you so much for sending the questions in. We're getting lots of emails, and keep those coming to stackingchips@cardplayer.com. So my first question comes in from Sean from Lincoln, Nebraska. Sean says, "Hi, John. First of all, congrats that you made a final table, and I hope there's more to come. I've been searching all over for answers on the internet, but can't find any. Hopefully you can help me out. I was in a home game, and everyone called the big blind preflop. On the flop, the small blind let out and got a few callers. The cutoff seat announced raise, but the dealer was busy chatting and flipped up the turn card before the cutoff was able to put in the raise. At this point, what's the official ruling? Is it a misdeal? Do we have a different turn card? What typically happens?" Well, Sean, that's it's kind of not a very common thing, but you do see that happen quite a bit in the live poker world. And what would typically happen is the dealer won't see that the last person to act has cards, and the action will be around to that person, and he or she will go to raise, and the dealer won't know that that person's in, and the dealer will have already burned and turned and put the turn card out there. Now, what would typically happen in this situation, at least from my experience, from what I've seen happen, what they do is they pull that, let's pretend this was a 7 of clubs they put on the turn. The dealer will pull back down the 7 of clubs, they'll go ahead and complete the action on the flop, and then what they'll do is they'll burn and turn the river card. There'll be action around as if the river card is the turn card, and then the dealer will shuffle the 7 of clubs back into the deck, what's left of it, and then just peel off the river card without burning a card. So again, that happens fairly common. Dealer doesn't see that all the players have acted yet, and again, they will burn and turn as if that 7 of clubs never came, and then they'll shuffle that 7 of clubs back in the deck and then just peel it off on the river without burning. And by the way, when they do shuffle the cards, they do not shuffle in any of the muck or any of the burn cards. The muck stays separate, the 3 burn cards stay separate. The only cards that get shuffled are the stub, which is the cards that are still in the dealer's hand, and that 7 of clubs. Let's see, the next question comes from Casey. "Hey John, first off, great show. My question involves both tournament and cash game play. I don't really get a chance to go to a casino all that often due to the fact that I don't live near one. But when I do go, I find myself making one key mistake. I can't seem to be able to look at a player's stack and tell how much they have without taking a long time to think about it. Can you give me a tip to be able to size someone's stack up quickly? I think my problem is due to online poker, where the players' chips are there in front of you and you don't have to think about it. Thanks for the help. Keep up the good work. That's from Casey in Bonners Ferry, Idaho. Well, Casey, that's a first of all, that's a very important thing. You always need to understand exactly how many chips your opponents have. The internet obviously makes that very easy because you just see the total dollar amounts as opposed to having to look at the chips. But I guess what I would suggest, and I've never really helped anyone necessarily try to understand that, but the most key thing is understanding how many chips are in any given stack. So if you understand exactly how many chips are in a 20 stack just by looking across the table, then that should be easy for you to then decide if any given stack is half of 20s or whether it's a 40 stack or a 50 stack. I'd say for the most part people keep their chips in 20 stacks. So once you understand how many chips are in a stack, then obviously you know the denomination of the chip based on the color or whatever. So it's real easy to tell. Another way to count the chips is in pyramids. A lot of times people will stack their chips almost like the pins are in a bowling alley. They'll have 4 and then 3 and then 2 and then 1 in like a triangular shape. So right away you know that that's 10 stacks, right? They're usually 20 high, so you know that there's 10 stacks of 20. If they're $100 chips, you know each stack is 2,000, so that's 20,000 in chips. If they're 5,000 stacks, if they're $500 chips, then they're in $10,000 stacks. So there's 100,000 in chips, and so on. So basically, I would just practice stacking up chips, or having your friends stack up chips at the other side of the table, and trying to get good at estimating how many chips are in each stack. And then, of course, try multiple stacks and different denominations of chips, etc. But it is important to be able to size up your opponent's stack just by looking across the table. Of course, you can always ask, and you always have the right to ask, and the player is obligated to tell you how many chips he has. Not necessarily down to the single dollar, but the player is obligated to show you all of his chips and count it down a lot of the times if you ask. But at the same time, there's a lot of tells that can be revealed when you ask a player how many chips he or she has left. So my suggestion is to get very good at sizing up the stacks by practicing with your friends as opposed to asking at the table. Let's see, my last question comes in from Mark B. in New Jersey. Mark says, "Hey John, I'm planning on coming out for my first World Series event this summer and was wondering if you had any tips for a first-timer as to what to expect and how to prepare. Congrats on a great show. Keep it up." Thanks, Mark. Well, this is I actually, most of the email questions that I get are very similar to this one. It's people that are coming out for the first World Series. They're not sure what to expect. They're not sure how to prepare. They're not sure, how to survive in short stack tournaments, what to do in these big fields. Let's see. Basically, I would say, first of all, I would come out here well rested. I would come out here healthy. These rooms are massive. They're crowded. You're constantly dealing with people. There's, lots of people coughing and sneezing all over the place. So you definitely don't want to come out here and get sick. So definitely take your vitamins, but I don't think that's really what you're asking me. But, basically I would come out here and I would just treat this tournament like any other tournament. The World Series of Poker gets so many amateurs signing up in these tournaments that you're not, just because it's such a prestigious event doesn't mean that you're going up against the best players in the world. In fact, because the World Series has gone so mainstream, I would say the World Series tournaments have the highest percentage of donkeys over any of the major events. So if you play in a World Poker Tour event, you're going to be up against a very strong field, most likely. If you play in a $1,500 World Series event, you're going to get a lot of fish in there that either won their seat in or they're just risking their entire bankroll to take a shot. And I would say just treat it like any other tournament. Don't come in here and be intimidated. Don't be nervous. Treat it like you would a $100 tournament. Don't try to blind off to get into the money because that's going to hurt you. Just come in and relax and be yourself and do whatever it takes. Just play good and play well. And don't get crazy. Don't be intimidated. So that's really the best advice I can give you on that. As far as that, I would say, sign up early. I like to sign up for the events the day before because I don't like, or at least the day before. I don't like coming into Rio and having to wait in line right before an event. I don't like starting an event late as an alternate and having to wait an hour before I get in the tournament. And a lot of these tournaments, they're getting fields of 2,000 and 3,000 players. So the lines can obviously be very long the day of the tournament. So I would try to make an effort to sign up early so you're not stuck there waiting in lines, and then you get there and you feel pressured and short stacked because everyone's already doubled up already at your table. So, hopefully that helps. Mark, thanks for the question. Keep them coming. Again, send your email questions to stackingchips@cardplayer.com. All right, I'm going to bring my guest on the show. As I mentioned, his name is Matt Rightnour. He lives in Washington, D.C., plays a lot of live poker, mostly cash games, but some tournaments in Atlantic City. He is also a professional in the investment banking and consulting world. And ladies and gentlemen, let's bring him on, Mr. Matt Rightnour. Matt, thanks for coming on the show, man. Glad to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
So you and I actually met last year in event number 17, which turned out to be the event that I won my first bracelet in.
Yes, it was. I kept trying to steal your blinds all day. So.
Yeah, Matt and I played. We were at the same table for about the second half of day one. Mm-hmm. And Matt was to my immediate right. I was short stacked the entire day, and it kept getting folded around to him in the small blind, and he kept raising my blind every time. And there was one hand, actually, before we'll get to the fun stuff later, but there was one hand that we always joke about, and that was it was folded to him, and again in the small blind, he raised, and I just got sick of it. He had done this like maybe 4 times in a row, and I said, you know what, screw this guy.
Take your
so I looked down at my cards. I'm not going to say what I had, but I move all in. He ends up folding, I think, ace-9, a suited ace-9. Right? He gave me respect because I kept folding to him. Finally, I just made a stand. So afterwards, I told him I had pocket 10s. He was like, oh, okay, cool. So later on that night, we sort of gotten to talk a little bit and, introduced ourselves and, became friendly with each other. So we go outside. We're on a break later on and say, you know what, to tell you the truth, Matt, I didn't really have pocket 10s. I had a king-queen. He's like, oh, yeah,
I'm still happy with
we're about a race. I had an ace-9, he says. Well, anyway, so then he and I, he goes back to the East Coast or whatever. We stay in touch and, become friends or whatever. So finally I said, look, I got to tell you the truth, man. I had a Jack-6 offsuit, man, and I just got sick of you stealing my blinds.
I don't know, even know if I really had ace-9 to tell you the truth.
Right.
Ever being honest now. But.
Anyway, so he knows and everyone else knows that I have his $1,000 buy-in framed. Mm-hmm. That's the only $1,000 that I didn't spend from the $500,000 that I won last year in the World Series.
It's always good to know.
Just so I can always screw with him and show him his framed money. Anyway, on a more serious note, Matt is a very good friend of mine. As I mentioned, we met last year in the World Series when he was out here just for one event. Mm-hmm. Much like myself, Matt used to be much like I used to be, Matt is in the corporate world, but also plays poker part-time and has mentioned that he does, about the same in poker as he does in business. So that's it. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and education and how you got started in poker and sort of, how you view poker.
All right. Well, I went to Wake Forest University, had an economics degree, graduated in 2001. I then went to graduate school up in Buffalo, and that's actually where I began playing poker. I went to Niagara Falls quite a bit and started playing 2-4 and 3-6 limit, and was a losing player for the first 6 months, like most people are. But then I found no limit cash games and became pretty successful with that. So helped pay the bills while in grad school, and after graduate school, I had a decision to make if I wanted to, continue on with poker or kind of go in a more corporate direction, which is what I chose to do. And I definitely like the split between having poker as a recreation and still having a steady job and staying busy doing that. But I still get a chance to play 2 or 3 times a month in Atlantic City. Usually go to Borgata cash games and done pretty well with those, and they've allowed me to kind of travel quite a bit and kind of I have some spending money, a little extra spending money to travel around and do things.
So you're here this year. You're between jobs right now. You just left the previous company you're working with, and you're starting up your next job in was it mid-July or something?
Yeah, in mid-July I start my next job. So it actually worked out pretty well because I was planning on coming out for a few events, but to have this time off, I chose to come out here and play in quite a few events. I'm also going to play in the main event out here for another week or so. Then I go back to D.C. For about a week and then come back out. So it's kind of allowed me to live the poker lifestyle for a month or so and see how that is. But yeah, I start my new job at the end of July.
So you realize if you win the main event or any of these events, you're probably not going to go to work.
But that's a separate. Yeah, there's a chance of that.
So you mentioned that you enjoy having poker as a recreational hobby, but also having sort of the security or the having a corporate job as well.
Right.
So what is it that you like about? I mean, I've played with you, several times actually. In fact, we played a lot together. Usually when I go to the East Coast, you come up and meet me, and we'll play a lot together.
Right.
I've no doubt that you could do very well if you played full time.
Right.
But you choose not to. So talk a little bit about why you choose to continue working as opposed to playing poker full time.
I definitely like the stability of a job, and I really enjoy what I do. It's crazy hours, but I really enjoy working in the financial markets and doing consulting and things. But I've always looked at poker as a hobby, as kind of a recreational thing. And I've also said that it'd be very. I've considered doing it, but I definitely think that the stability of a normal job and still having it on the weekends. I'm still making enough money in the cash games and things like to kind of have some extra spending money and things. But I don't think that I would. I don't think, unless I have a really big score, similar to what you did last year, I don't think I would quit the job anytime soon. So.
Well, I don't blame you. That's probably a smart thing. And I know that when I was working, and when I actually would go to the casino and play, it's a lot different when you lose money knowing that you're still going to get a paycheck than when you're playing full time. I mean, the stress level of playing full time as your primary source of income is skyrocketing compared to how it is when you're working. And I know when I used to work, when I was CEO at Reactrix, the company I started, every now and then, like maybe once every 3 months, I would find 3 or 4 hours to run down to the casino and play poker. And maybe I lost $1,000 or $2,000 in the 20-40 game or 30-60 game, but I would walk away, no sweat, doesn't matter.
It's a lot easier to rationalize your losses when you're getting a paycheck in 2 weeks. So.
Except when you lose the amount that exceeds your paycheck,
true.
Then it's a little bit different.
True.
But then I started playing poker full time, and it's very different when you lose $2,000 and you don't have income. So you have to be very disciplined and really focused and understanding that it's a long-term game, and you are going to have some losses. But ultimately, it's all about the long term. And as long as your wins exceed your losses, then that's fine. But even the best poker players, certainly cannot win every time. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people ask me, because I do have a business background, and I thought it would be fun to have you on and talk about this. I get approached a lot, both emails to the show here at Stacking Chips and also just personally, whether it's email or MySpace or whatever. People will ask me about the balance between work life and poker, where they play poker, but they either feel like they work too much and therefore they can't improve their poker game, or their poker game is starting to take over their personal life and they're not able to focus on their job or their relationships. How have you managed to be so successful at balancing your professional life from your poker life, from your personal life?
Well, actually, I think one of the most important things is to keep them completely separate. I have 2 separate bank accounts. I have my bank account for work, for my paychecks from there, and I also have a bank account for my poker money. So I think that's very important to have like a poker bankroll and really like a life bankroll, for lack of a better word. But so I like to keep those separate, and all my spending money and traveling money and things is from my poker bankroll, and that's kind of how I gauge what events I'm going to play and what cash game limits I'm going to play. And I think it's also important to really not do it. I don't really play at all during the week. I lived really close to Atlantic City, but I was never going there after work or doing anything like that. I always save that for the weekends, which I think is important to, because I've known friends that had jobs and they would leave their job, go play, and play through the night and then go to their job the next morning, and that never worked out too well for them. So I've always tried to keep everything separate, and that seems to be working out pretty well. So
So this is your first time coming out to Vegas for an extended period. There's the lights, the glitz, the glamour,
Yeah.
you know, the all of the temptations here in town. Then, of course, there's the big tournaments, the World
Right.
Series tournaments. You're playing multiple events for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And so coming out here, are you distracted at all by the all of the sins here in Sin City calling your name, or
Right.
are you focused on the tournaments, and what have you done to prepare, and how's it going for you so far?
To be honest, I mean, I've been out to Vegas quite a few times, so I think I saw all the sins and all those other options the first few times. And
Could you go into? I'm just kidding.
my parents might be watching. So I've been out here and I kind of knew what to expect, and I viewed this as strictly a poker trip, you know.
Yeah, that's funny.
Little plug right
little
there.
plug here for.
Yeah. So anyway, I viewed it as strictly, you know, coming out here for the World Series and doing this experience. And I really haven't gone to any clubs since we've been out here or done anything like that, and just kind of tried to focus on you know, the cash games. The side action's pretty good. So the World Series events have gone all right. You know, haven't done anything too spectacular yet, but you know, I've kind of just seen it all before, so it's nice to just kind of focus on poker.
Yeah. So to all of those people coming out here for their first time,
Mm-hmm.
what piece of advice would you give them aside from not hanging out at the Rhino all night?
Right. Yeah. I think, like I said, I think it's really important to view it as strictly coming out here for the World Series. And you know, if you're playing in a $1,500 event, don't just plan on bringing $1,500 out, because it does get expensive. You know, the dinners and just kind of, when you're out here, you have so much temptation to just do anything, to spend money and you know, try and win it at the cash games and then go spend it. But I think it's important to just kind of bring your maybe $2,500 if you're playing in a $1,500 event and plan on using that all. You know, if you go ahead and cash, but remember, you know, only 10% of the field cashes, so you know, don't count on that as well. So I think it's important to be realistic about it.
Awesome. Well, that sounds like good advice. I would certainly agree with that. Well, you and I are playing in the $1,500 No Limit Hold'em event today. I think it's event number 35, and could be wrong by one or two, but it is $1,500 No Limit today here Thursday. You and I are both in it, so let's go over there and kick some ass. And
Sounds good.
Let's take this thing down.
All right.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on the show, Matt.
Hey, thanks for
Appreciate
having
it.
me. Thanks
Glad
for
to have
having
you here. Well, that's it for today's episode of Stacking Chips. Make sure to tune in tomorrow and every day throughout the World Series for more strategy talk, discussions, interviews, and more right here on Card Player TV. And keep those emails coming in to stackingchips@cardplayer.com. From John Poker Chip Friedberg
And Matt Rightnour.
we're out of here. Good luck, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.
See ya.